"You're late," my mother announced as she stepped onto the porch, pulling her suitcase behind her. I glanced at my car's dashboard, 6:02 a.m. 2 minutes late. "Mom," I said, forcing a smile as I got out to help with the luggage. That's when I saw her, my sister Rachel, emerging from the house with her own suitcase. My smile froze. What's going on? At 32, I'd spent the last 2 years working overtime and saving every penny to give my parents a dream European vacation. Now, watching Rachel saunter down the driveway, something felt terribly wrong. "Oh, Sarah." My mother's voice was far too cheerful for the early hour. "We decided Rachel should come instead of you. She's been so stressed lately and she really needs this trip." My chest tightened. "Instead of me?" "Mom, I've been planning this for years. I paid for everything." She waved her hand dismissively. "And we're grateful, sweetheart, but you're always working so hard. You can take another trip later. Rachel needs this right now." Rachel, my 29-year-old perpetually unemployed sister, didn't even have the decency to look guilty. She just smirked, shifting her weight onto one hip. "Thanks for understanding, sis," she said, her tone dripping with fake gratitude. I stared at them both, my heart pounding. Dad shuffled out a moment later, avoiding eye contact as he handed me his suitcase. "This is unbelievable," I said, my voice shaking. "This was supposed to be our trip. Something for me to share with you." "Well, it still is," Mom said with a smile. "Just with Rachel instead. Don't make this a big deal, Sarah." Standing there in my parents' driveway, watching Rachel climb into the back seat of my car, I realized something I'd been avoiding for years. It didn't matter how much effort I put in. In their eyes, Rachel would always come first. I clenched my jaw, biting back the sharp retort sitting on the tip of my tongue. Instead, I forced a tight smile and opened the trunk. "Let's get going then," I said, my voice flat. If they wanted to prioritize her over me, fine. They could go with her. But I wasn't about to let them enjoy it. The drive to the airport was suffocatingly quiet, broken only by Rachel's incessant chatter. "Oh my gosh, Mom, did you see that TikTok about Paris? One can't wait to go shopping there. Do you think we'll have time for that? Or will the tours take up the whole day?" My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter as I stared straight ahead, forcing myself not to say anything. Mom chuckled softly. "Of course we'll have time. We'll figure it out when we get there." I bit the inside of my cheek. When we get there, they didn't even seem to notice I wasn't part of that we anymore. At one point, Dad cleared his throat. "Thank you for driving us, Sarah. I know this probably feels unusual." I glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "Unusual? That's an interesting way to put it, Dad." He didn't respond, just shifted uncomfortably in his seat, probably wishing he hadn't spoken at all. Rachel leaned forward from the back seat, her voice grating. "You're not mad, right? I mean, this is really big of you letting me go. I could never have afforded this on my own." I clenched my jaw and forced a tight smile. "Of course, Rachel. Enjoy the trip." By the time we pulled up to the airport drop-off zone, my patience was hanging by a thread. As I helped unload their luggage, Mom gave me a hug. "Thank you for understanding, sweetheart. This means a lot to us and to Rachel." The first nodded stiffly. "Sure, Mom." Rachel beamed as she wheeled her suitcase toward the entrance. "Thanks, Sarah. You're the best." I stood there watching them disappear into the terminal, my chest tight with anger and hurt. The ride back home was a blur as I replayed the conversation in my head over and over, each word cutting deeper than the last. "This means a lot to Rachel. You're not mad, right? You're always working so hard." I parked in my driveway and sat in the car for a few minutes, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Then, without a second thought, I marched into the house, pulled out my laptop, and logged into every travel account I'd used to book the trip. Hotel reservations, canceled, tours, refunded, airline upgrades, gone. I stared at the confirmation emails piling up in my inbox, feeling the tightness in my chest start to ease. They wanted to take Rachel instead of me? Fine, but they wouldn't be staying in 5-star hotels or enjoying private tours on my dime. I was done being their doormat. The calls started as soon as their flight landed. My phone buzzed repeatedly as I unpacked my own suitcase, the one I'd packed so carefully for a trip that was no longer mine. Each vibration filled my quiet house with its relentless urgency as I hung up dresses and placed shoes back on their shelves, trying to ignore the irony of it all. Finally, I picked up my phone and glanced at the screen. Mom's name flashed across it, accompanied by a flood of missed calls and texts. I unlocked the phone and scrolled through the messages. Sarah, what's going on? The hotel won't let us check in. The reservation is missing. Call me immediately. Sarah, this isn't funny. Fix this now. A laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Fix this? They really thought I'd swoop in and save the day after what they'd done. The phone buzzed again, this time with a call from Rachel. I let it ring out, only for her to leave a voicemail. Sarah, this is so petty, she snapped, her voice dripping with entitlement. We're stuck here because of you. You need to call the hotel and fix it now. I rolled my eyes and deleted the voicemail without listening to the rest. For years, I'd been their fixer, the one who smoothed over every mistake and picked up every slack. Not anymore. Eventually, I decided to answer, if only to stop the barrage of calls. Mom's voice hit me like a tidal wave of anger as soon as I picked up. Sarah, what did you do? The hotel says the reservation was canceled, and none of the tours are booked anymore. I let her rant for a moment, then calmly replied, I canceled them. There was a long, stunned silence before she hissed. Why would you do that? Oh, I don't know, I said, my tone laced with sarcasm. Maybe because you decided to take Rachel on my trip? You're lucky I even drove you to the airport. We thought you'd understand, she snapped. Understand what? I asked, my voice rising. That years of saving and planning didn't matter because Rachel needed a break? That my hard work meant nothing to you? Guess what, Mom? I don't understand, and I don't care to. I hung up before she could respond and turned my phone off, tossing it onto the couch. The silence that followed was blissful, and I felt like I could breathe again. If they wanted to prioritize Rachel, fine, but they could figure out the rest of the trip without me. The silence lasted exactly one day. By the next morning, my phone was buzzing again with calls and messages. At first, I ignored them, spending the day cleaning my house and catching up on work. But curiosity got the better of me by evening, and I opened my phone to face the storm. From Mom, Sarah, you've gone too far. Your sister is in tears and your father is furious. We can't get into any of the hotels you booked. From Rachel, you're acting like a child. I don't get why you're making this such a big deal. Just fix it already. And finally, from Dad, we need to talk. This isn't right. I set the phone down, shaking my head. For years, I'd been the one to fix things, to make sure everyone was comfortable and happy. Now that I'd taken a step back, they didn't know how to handle it. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat down at the kitchen table, letting the anger simmer. How dare they expect me to clean up their mess? How dare they act like I was the one in the wrong? The next call came minutes later, and this time I answered. Sarah, Mom barked before I could say a word. This isn't funny anymore. We're stranded. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is? I took a slow sip of my tea. Embarrassing? You think this is embarrassing? Try saving for years, planning every detail, and then being told you're not even part of the trip you paid for. Stop being dramatic, she snapped. Rachel needed this more than you, and now she can figure it out, I said firmly. You made your decision, Mom. You wanted to take Rachel instead of me? Fine, but don't expect me to fund her vacation. We're family, she hissed. We don't do this to each other. I let out a bitter laugh. Funny, I was just thinking the same thing. Rachel's voice came through the background whining, Mom, just hang up on her. She's being impossible. That was the final straw. Enjoy your trip, I said, my tone icy. Oh wait, you can't because it's not your trip. It was mine, and now it's nobody's. Goodbye. I hung up before she could respond and turned my phone off again. For the rest of the evening, I felt an odd mix of anger and relief anger that they'd put me in this position, but relief that I'd finally stood up for myself. They could call me dramatic all they wanted. For the first time in my life, I wasn't letting them take advantage of me. The next few days passed in blissful quiet. With my phone turned off, I finally had space to think clearly, free from the barrage of guilt trips and accusations. My mornings were spent sipping coffee on my back porch, savoring a calm I hadn't known in years. Afternoons filled themselves with work and small projects. I'd neglected reminders of how capable I was when not weighted down by their endless demands. But by the third day, curiosity crept in like an unwelcome guest. I turned my phone back on to find over a dozen voicemails waiting. The first few were from Mom, her voice growing increasingly hysterical with each one. "Sarah, you need to call me back right now. This has gone too far. I can't believe you're doing this. You've humiliated us. We're your parents. How could you treat us this way?" Then came Rachel's messages, dripping with her usual entitled tone. "This is so petty, even for you. You're ruining everything. Just fix it, Sarah." Dad's voice was quieter, but no less pointed. "Sarah, I don't understand what's happened to you. Call us back so we can sort this out." The final voicemail made me pause a long one from Mom, her voice now tinged with exhaustion and defeat. "Sarah, we're back at the airport now. The trip is ruined, and I hope you're happy with yourself. Your sister is devastated, and your father and I are, well, disappointed doesn't even begin to cover it. Call us when you're ready to talk." I deleted the voicemails without replying. I wasn't ready to talk, and honestly, I didn't know if I ever would be. This wasn't a one-time mistake. It was the culmination of years of them putting Rachel first and expecting me to accept it with a smile. As hours passed, memories surfaced like old photographs, every holiday where Rachel's whims dictated our plans, every family gathering where my accomplishments were treated as footnotes to her latest drama. The trip had been my breaking point, but the cracks had been forming for years. That evening, my best friend Lily showed up unannounced, carrying 2 cups of coffee and an unmistakable look of curiosity. "I heard about what happened," she said, setting the coffee on my kitchen counter. "Your mom called me yesterday." Of course she did. Mom had always been good at recruiting allies when she wanted to guilt me into compliance. "And?" I asked, taking a sip. Lily shrugged, a sly smile creeping across her face. "I told her you were probably busy and would get back to her when you were ready." I laughed, shaking my head. "You're the best. No, you're the best," she said, her tone suddenly serious. "Because you finally stood up for yourself, Sarah. I know how hard that is. Don't let them drag you back down." Her words stayed with me long after she left. Lily was right. I'd spent too long bending over backward to please people who never seemed to care about my efforts. It was time to break that cycle. By weekend's end, I felt a strange sense of clarity. The anger still simmered beneath the surface, but it was joined by something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. Freedom from their endless expectations. Freedom from being the family's fixer. Freedom to finally live on my own terms. But as expected, the silence couldn't last forever. Sunday afternoon brought a call I finally decided to answer, this time from Dad. "Sarah," he began, his voice heavy with weariness. "Your mom wanted me to call. She thinks you'll listen to me." "Go on," I said, leaning back in my chair. He let out a sigh. "Look, this has all gotten out of hand. Your mom's upset, Rachel's furious, and, well, it's just a mess. But you're better than this." I stiffened, his words igniting a fresh wave of anger. "Better than what, Dad? Standing up for myself? Refusing to let you walk all over me again? That's not what I meant," he said quickly. "It's just, you've always been the reasonable one, the one who keeps everything together. This isn't like you." I laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You're right. It's not like me. Because I'm not bending over backward to clean up your mess anymore." He paused, and for a moment, I thought he might finally see my side of things. "But then, you're punishing the whole family over one decision. Is that really fair?" "Fair?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You want to talk about fair? Was it fair when you and Mom decided I wasn't important enough to be part of the trip I planned? Was it fair when you replaced me with Rachel like I didn't matter?" "That's not what we were trying to do," he said, his tone defensive. "We just thought Rachel needed it more." "Of course you did," I snapped. "You always think she needs more attention, more support, more of everything. And I'm always the one expected to sacrifice for her. Not anymore." The silence on the other end of the line stretched like a rubber band about to snap. Finally, he said, "I don't know what you want me to say." "I don't need you to say anything," I replied, my voice steady. "I just need you to understand that I'm done being the afterthought. From now on, I come first. Goodbye, Dad." I ended the call and set the phone down, my hands trembling. For the rest of the day, I let myself feel everything: anger, sadness, relief. It wasn't easy, but it felt like the start of something new. I wasn't the family's fixer anymore, and I wasn't going to be. They could figure out how to clean up their own messes. When my parents and Rachel finally returned, I was waiting for them at their house. I'd parked in their driveway, sipping coffee and feeling surprisingly calm as I watched their taxi pull up. As they stepped out, dragging their suitcases behind them, their faces were a mix of exhaustion and irritation. Rachel was the first to speak. "Well, I hope you're happy, Sarah." I raised an eyebrow, staying seated on the porch swing. "Happy about what?" "Our trip was a disaster," Mom snapped, waving her hand as if to brush the whole thing away. "We spent the entire week staying in dingy hotels and eating terrible food because we couldn't afford anything decent. And don't get me started on the tours." "Oh, wait," Rachel chimed in, crossing her arms. "There weren't any. Do you know how embarrassing it was to show up and be told there was no reservation?" I took another sip of coffee, letting their complaints wash over me. "Sounds rough. But you wanted to take Rachel, remember? I'm sure you all had some great bonding time." "That's not the point," Mom shot back, her voice rising. "You knew we couldn't afford all the things you'd planned. You set us up to fail." I stood up, setting my mug down on the small table next to me. "No, Mom, I didn't set you up for anything. I planned a trip for the three of us, something special I'd been saving for years." "You're the ones who decided to cut me out at the last second." Dad finally spoke up, his tone quieter but no less accusatory. "You didn't have to cancel everything, Sarah. That was extreme, was it?" I asked, folding my arms. "Why should I have paid for a trip I wasn't even invited to? If Rachel needed it so badly, you should have planned it yourselves." "You're lucky I didn't cancel the return flight," Rachel rolled her eyes. "You're so dramatic." "It's just money, Sarah. And you're so entitled," I shot back, my patience finally snapping. "Do you have any idea how much work and sacrifice went into planning that trip? Or do you just assume things magically appear for you because someone else takes care of it?" They stood there, stunned into silence for a moment. "I've spent years being the responsible one," I continued, my voice steady but firm. "The one who fixes things, plans things, makes sure everything runs smoothly. And you've spent just as long taking it all for granted." "That's not fair," Mom started, but I held up a hand to stop her. "No, Mom, what's not fair is how you treated me. You chose Rachel over me, like always. So I chose to stop being your doormat. You didn't want me on the trip? Fine. But you don't get to enjoy the benefits of my hard work without me." I grabbed my bag from the porch swing and turned to leave. "I'm glad you're back safely, but don't expect things to go back to the way they were. I'm done." As I walked to my car, I heard them calling after me, their voices a mix of anger and guilt, but I didn't look back. The drive home felt strangely peaceful. For years, every visit had left me emotionally drained, but this time I felt lighter. I'd finally said everything I'd been holding in, and for once, I wasn't worried about their reaction. When I got back to my house, I made a cup of tea and sat on the couch, replaying the confrontation in my head. They'd been so sure I'd fold, that I'd give in like always. But watching their stunned faces as I walked away was a reminder of how much I'd changed. They could be angry, hurt, or embarrassed, it didn't matter anymore. I was done living my life to meet their expectations. The next day, Lily called. "How'd it go?" she asked, not bothering with pleasantries. I laughed, leaning back against the kitchen counter. "Exactly like you'd imagine. They're furious," Rachel's pouting, "and Mom is probably trying to figure out how to guilt me back into line." Lily let out a snort. "Let her try. You've got a backbone now, and I'm here to make sure it stays in place." I grinned, grateful for her unwavering support. "Thanks, Lily. I mean it. You've been my rock through all of this." "Anytime," she said, her voice softening. "So what's next for you now that you're not playing family fixer anymore?" That question had been circling in my mind since the confrontation. What was next? For years, so much of my energy had been poured into trying to please my family, trying to earn their approval. Now that I'd let go of that burden, the possibilities felt endless and a little intimidating. "I don't know yet," I admitted, "but I feel like I get to decide. Not them, not anyone else, just me." "Sounds like the start of something amazing," Lily said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Over the next few weeks, I started making small changes that felt monumental in their own way. I redecorated my living room, swapping out the hand-me-down furniture from my parents for pieces that felt uniquely mine. I spent weekends exploring local cafes and parks, things I'd always meant to do, but never made time for. And I started journaling, writing down my thoughts and dreams without filtering them through the lens of what anyone else might think. Each small step felt like reclaiming a part of myself I hadn't realized I'd lost. One evening, I sat down and opened the spreadsheet I'd used to plan the trip. The canceled reservations stared back at me, but I didn't feel a pang of regret. Instead, I felt a surge of determination. That money had been meant for a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and I wasn't going to let it go to waste. Closing the spreadsheet, I opened a new browser tab and typed, "Solo travel ideas." A few weeks later, I booked a trip to Italy. Not the same itinerary I'd planned for them. This wasn't about proving a point anymore. This was, for me, a chance to celebrate my independence and finally put myself first. The moment I landed in Rome, I felt a surge of excitement and nervousness. I'd never traveled alone before, but as I stepped out of the airport and into the bustling city, I knew I'd made the right decision. I spent my days wandering cobblestone streets, marveling at ancient ruins, and indulging in meals at charming little cafes. There was no schedule, no one else to consider, just me and the freedom to do exactly what I wanted. One afternoon, while sitting on the Spanish steps with a gelato in hand, I pulled out the journal I'd brought with me. For years, I'd written about what I wanted to achieve, but those dreams were always wrapped up in making someone else happy. Now, as I wrote, the focus shifted: learn a new language, start a small business, travel to at least 5 more countries. The list grew, each goal a reflection of the life I wanted to create, not the one I'd been expected to live. On my last night in Florence, I had dinner at a small family-run restaurant overlooking the Arno River. As I watched the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, I felt a deep sense of peace. This trip had been more than just a vacation, it was a turning point. I'd spent so much of my life trying to earn my family's approval, but here, thousands of miles away, I realized something important: I didn't need it. I was enough just as I was. When I returned home, my parents tried to reach out again, this time with softer tones and carefully worded messages. "Hope you had a nice trip." One text from Mom read, "Maybe we can all talk soon?" I stared at the message for a moment before setting my phone down. I wasn't ready to reply, and that was okay. This time, it would be on my terms. As I unpacked my suitcase and placed souvenirs on my shelves, I felt a sense of pride. Each item represented a choice I'd made for myself, a meal I'd enjoyed alone, a museum I'd visited at my own pace, a moment when I'd chosen my own path instead of following someone else's expectations. A week after returning, I received a call from Mom. This time I answered. "Hi, Sarah," she began, her tone unusually soft. "How was your trip?" "It was amazing," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "That's good to hear," she said, pausing as if searching for the right words. "We've been thinking a lot about what happened. Maybe we handled things poorly." The admission surprised me, but I wasn't ready to let her off the hook just yet. "Poorly? You replaced me on a trip I planned and paid for without even asking. Poorly is an understatement." "I know," she said quietly. "Your dad and I, WE, didn't realize how much it would hurt you." "And Rachel?" I asked. "Does she feel bad too? Or is she still blaming me for ruining her vacation?" "She's upset," Mom admitted, "but I think she knows she could have handled things better." I sighed, leaning against the counter. "Mom, this wasn't just about the trip. It's about years of putting her first and expecting me to pick up the slack. I'm not doing it anymore." "I understand," she said after a moment. "We're going to try to do better. We don't want to lose you." Her words tugged at something deep inside me, but I'd learned enough not to let guilt dictate my choices. "I'm glad to hear that," I said, "but it's going to take more than words to fix this. I need to see real effort, not just apologies." "You will," she promised. "We'll give you the space you need, but I hope you'll let us back in someday." After the call, I felt a mix of emotions: relief that they were finally acknowledging their behavior, and skepticism about whether they'd actually change. But as I sat down with my journal that evening, I realized something important: whether or not they changed wasn't my responsibility. Over the following months, I kept my boundaries firm. I responded to their calls and texts when I felt like it, but I didn't go out of my way to fix things or smooth over conflicts. Instead, I focused on building the life I wanted. I joined a local photography class, something I'd always dreamed of doing, but never had time for between managing family crises. Every Thursday evening, I'd spend 3 hours learning about composition, light, and shadow. My first few attempts were terrible, but I didn't care. The joy was in creating something just for me. The changes rippled through other areas of my life too. I started hiking with a local group on weekends, discovering trails I never knew existed just hours from my home. I even began planning my next solo trip, this time to Japan. Each step forward felt like breaking free from invisible chains I'd carried for years. Rachel tried reaching out a few times, but her messages still carried that familiar tone of expectation. "Can we grab coffee? I need your advice about something." I didn't rush to respond. Let her figure things out on her own for once. Mom and Dad made more effort. They stopped trying to guilt me into family gatherings and instead asked if I'd like to join them for dinner sometimes. Just the three of us. When I did accept, I noticed small changes. They asked about my photography, remembered details about my upcoming trip, and didn't mention Rachel unless I brought her up first. One Sunday evening, Mom invited me over for dinner. As we sat in their kitchen, the same space where so many family dramas had unfolded, something felt different. "I've been thinking about that Europe trip," she said, setting down her fork. "Not just about what happened, but about why you planned it in the first place." I looked up, surprised by her directness. "You wanted to give us something special," she continued, "and we threw it back in your face. I'm not just sorry about taking Rachel instead of you. I'm sorry we made you feel like you had to earn our love with grand gestures in the first place." Dad reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "We both are, Sarah. We spent so many years expecting you to be the strong one, the responsible one, that we forgot you needed us too." Their words touched something tender in my chest, but I didn't rush to smooth things over like I would have before. "Thank you for saying that," I said carefully. "It means a lot to hear you acknowledge it. We know it's going to take time," Mom added. "We're not asking for everything to go back to the way it was. Maybe it shouldn't." I nodded, feeling tears prick at the corners of my eyes. No, it shouldn't. The way things were wasn't healthy for any of us. Later that night, as I drove home under a star-filled sky, I thought about how far we'd all come. The hurt wasn't gone, maybe it never would be completely, but it had transformed into something else. A catalyst for change. A boundary marker for the person I was becoming. My phone buzzed with a text from Lily. "Survived dinner with the parents?" I smiled, typing back, actually, "Yeah, they're trying, really trying." "And you're okay?" "More than okay," I replied. "I'm free." Because that's what this journey had given me, not just independence from my family's expectations, but freedom to be myself, to make mistakes, to live life on my own terms. The trip I'd planned might have fallen apart, but it had led me somewhere far more valuable than Europe. The next morning, I woke up early and drove to a nearby lake to catch the sunrise. As I set up my camera, adjusting the settings just as I'd learned in class, I thought about how different my life looked now compared to 6 months ago. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "I miss you, sis. I know I messed up. Can we talk?" I stared at the message for a long moment, watching the sun paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Then I typed back, "Coffee next week?" My treat. Because that's the thing about growth, it's not just about learning to stand up for yourself, but also about choosing when to extend a hand, not from obligation or guilt, but from a place of strength and self-respect. As I snapped photos of the sunrise reflecting off the lake's surface, I realized that this was my real destination all along. Not a European vacation or family approval, but this quiet confidence in who I am and what I deserve. The trip I'd planned might have been about giving my parents an experience they'd never forget, but its unraveling had given me something far more precious. It had given me myself. And that, more than any 5-star hotel or guided tour, was worth every penny I'd saved. Story 2, I'm Tamara, and when I received my business administration degree, I had just turned 22. I had had the good fortune to reside in my grandmother's old apartment during my time in college. Well, technically, my father's now, as he acquired it after she passed away 3 years ago. I only had to cover the utility bills, which I managed by working part-time at Luigi's. an Italian restaurant just 2 blocks away. Balancing employment and education wasn't always simple. There were numerous of evenings when I'd come home fatigued, hungry, sore from waiting tables just to face hours of studying for exams or writing papers. But I made it work because that's what responsible adults do. The graduation dinner at my parents' house seemed perfect at first. Mom had excelled herself with the meal as usual. My younger sister Emily, 17 at the time, kept making jokes about how she'd miss having me help her with her homework. A handful of relatives came too, and Uncle Bob, my cousins Mike and Jenny, and my grandmother from my mom's side. They were all congratulating me and sharing stories about their own college days. However, things changed when the family departed. My stomach knotted up the moment Mom cleared her throat, as she always did before saying something awkward. I'd knew that sound since childhood. It was never a positive sign. Tamara, honey, she began in an oddly formal tone. We need to talk about the apartment situation now that you've graduated. I recall carefully placing my coffee cup down while attempting to maintain a steady hand. The ceramic made a soft clink against the saucer that seemed unusually loud in the suddenly quiet room. How about it? Well, if you want to continue living there, you'll need to start paying rent. The words were as frigid as a pail of water. On my graduation day, of all days, Dad sat there calmly, suddenly extremely interested in his coffee cup, while Emily pretended to be focused in her phone, though I could see her watching the incident develop from the corner of her eye. It was smaller than I had hoped, but I managed to respond. I see, my boy. My hand trembled slightly as I reached for my water glass. In her matter-of-fact manner, Mom continued to define the concepts. The rent would be below market rate, a family discount. She named it with a tight grin, but still considerable. I quickly calculated in my head. I would require a speedy, full-time employment. This would not be covered by the part-time pay. I understand, I replied finally. For what else could I say? They were somewhat correct. I was no longer a pupil. I was an adult, and adults paid their way in life. Even so, it seemed cruel that they had to bring me back to reality after allowing me to celebrate for just one day. That night, laying on my bed at the flat, I started browsing for employment vacancies nearby. The restaurant where I worked half-time couldn't offer me full-time hours, so I realized I wanted something new, something more permanent. I made an effort to ignore the hurt feelings that were simmering beneath the surface and concentrate on the practical aspects of the listings as I browsed through them on my phone. The next year went by in a flurry of jobs, rent payments, and adjusting to post-college life. I got a good job at a marketing company close to the flat. Nothing fancy, but I paid the bills and then some. Even though my starting pay as a junior account coordinator wasn't very high, it was sufficient to pay my parents' rent and utilities. I diligently sent the rent money to Mom's account each month, generally adding a little extra for utilities even though she never requested it, because I always had some money left over for savings. I wanted to demonstrate my maturity, dependability, and ability to handle adult responsibilities. I wouldn't acknowledge it to myself at the time, but perhaps a part of me was still attempting to win their favor. Every now and then, Emily would drop by, usually to raid my closet or ask for assistance with college applications. I saw that she was growing more aloof and private throughout her final year of high school. Her visits became less about spending time with me and more about what she could get from me: help with homework, clothing, and boy advice. Emily had always been the baby of the family, used to having her way. Mom and Dad spoiled her rotten, though I tried not to be bitter about it. They'd never made her get a part-time job, like I had never pushed her to be independent. She started dating Jason around this time. He worked part-time at the mall's electronics store and was a year older than her. The first time she brought him to my apartment, I wasn't particularly impressed. Despite his seeming kindness, there was something about him that raised suspicions. Maybe it was the way he talked about getting rich quick, or how he seemed to expect everyone to take care of him. Then came the phone call that would change everything. "Tamara, you must come over immediately." Mom's voice was tight with strain. "It's crucial." I assumed it would be about Emily's college plans. She'd been waffling between several schools, and I figured Mom wanted my input. Perhaps they wanted to talk about scholarship opportunities or needed assistance with financial planning. Emily had decent grades. Not fantastic like mine had been, but good enough to get into a public school. How incorrect I was. When I arrived at my parents' house that evening, it was an odd atmosphere. Mom and Dad sat rigidly on their usual spots on the couch, while Emily perched on the armchair, looking smug. That was the only word for it. Dad said in a gravelly voice, "Sit down, Tamara." He looked older, somehow tired in a way I hadn't noticed before. I perched on the edge of the ottoman, my heart thumping. Whatever this was, it was not about applying to colleges. "Emily is pregnant," Mom announced without preamble. Stunned, I sat there trying to take in what I had just heard. My 18-year-old sister's boyfriend, a part-time mall employee, became pregnant with her. I observed Mom's hands twitching in her lap, an anxious habit she'd had since I was tiny. "There's something more we need to address," Mom said, straightening her back and smoothing her skirt. "Emily and Jason will need a place to reside. They'll be moving into the apartment." It seemed as if someone had hit me. The room started spinning slightly, and I had to hold the edge of the ottoman to stabilize myself. "Please pardon me," Mom said. "You'll have to move out," as if she were discussing the weather with me. "Emily and Jason need somewhere to start their family. Really, it's the ideal solution. The apartment is already furnished. It's in a good neighborhood, and it's close to Jason's parents." I glanced at Emily, who was grinning contentedly as she examined her recently painted nails. She didn't even have the decency to look uncomfortable about kicking her own sister out of her home. She was wearing my old sweater again. I noticed absently the one she'd borrowed last month and never returned. With my brain whirling, I managed to remark that it was just time to find a new location. My stomach turned at the idea of looking for an apartment while working a full-time job. A week should be enough. "Oh, and Tamara," as if she had nearly forgotten something as simple as asking me to get milk on the way home, Mom said. "The rent will still need to be paid by you." I actually laughed out loud, thinking it was a joke. My laughter died in my throat when I saw their serious faces, even though the sound was harsh and unwanted in the tense room. "You're not serious." "Your sister and Jason are young," Mom stated slowly. "Like if talking to a kid. They don't have work yet, and with the baby coming," she trailed off, nodding blankly at Emily's still flapped tummy. "So let me get this straight," I interrupted, my voice rising despite my efforts to be cool. "Do you want me to vacate and keep up my flat rent? I won't be living in for them." "They need our help, Tamara," Dad said sternly, meeting my eyes at last. "It's your obligation as the older sister. Family helps. Family, my responsibility." I got to my feet, my hands trembling with rage. "Right now. If they're grown enough to have a baby, they're mature enough to acquire jobs and support themselves. Have any of them ever tried to get full-time employment?" "How could you be so self-centered?" Emily suddenly piped up, her eyes filling with dramatic tears. When she was 12 and wanted a new phone, or when she was 14 and couldn't attend a party, I had witnessed the same cries. "I will become a mother. Are your niece and nephew unimportant to you?" "You're being very ungrateful," Mom said coldly. "After everything we've done for you, I'm grateful. I've been paying rent for the last year. I've been working since college, and now you want me to support two perfectly capable adults who got themselves into this situation? I'm not paying a single dime for them. If you want to enable this, that's your choice. But count me out." I went out of the house with their yells of ungrateful and selfish. Following me to my car, the front door slammed behind me with a finality that felt like the end of something fundamental. I didn't wait a week. That very night, I started packing my things. I was crying as I combed through 4 years' worth of recollections. Fortunately, I had considerable funds. It was finally going to pay off after all those extra hours of work. I've been putting aside money for a rainy day, and apparently the storm had arrived. I located a little studio apartment across town and signed the lease the next day. It wasn't as nice as my former house. The kitchen was small. The bathroom needed updating, and the commute to work would be longer. It was mine, though. I created thorough inventory of everything in the flat as I was packing, classifying things according to who had paid for them. The furnishings my parents had supplied stayed behind the ancient couch from their basement, the dining table that had been my grandmother's, the bookcase Dad had constructed when I first moved here, but the books that filled it, my coffee machine and the clothing in the closet were placed in boxes with my name on them, along with the kitchenware I had bought myself. A splurge after my first bonus at work, my laptop bought with 3 months of saved tips from the ledges, my bed purchased piece by piece, framed the mattress bedding. Everything I had worked so hard to acquire was packed up and shipped to my new home over the first 6 months of my full-time job. I moved everything over the course of 2 days. When I requested a personal day, my supervisor was accommodating. After I finished explaining everything, I drove past my parents' house and went to bed. The apartment key under their door. No note was left by me. What was there to say that hadn't already been said? A week later, my phone exploded with notifications. Mom was phoning, her voice harsh with wrath. "What have you done to the apartment?" She made a demand. "It's deserted. Everything that was there when I moved in is still there." I answered coolly, trying to maintain a steady tone of voice. "I only took mine. I used my own funds to purchase those items. Money I made while attending college and working. Perhaps Jason and Emily could attempt the same. You selfish little." The barrage of expletives that followed would have made a sailor blush. I'd never heard my mother use such profanity before. I hung up before she could continue that night, sitting on my mattress in my new apartment. I sobbed for the first time since this entire disaster started. I wept for the family I believed I had, for the sister who became a stranger, and for the parents who had decided to support her rather than me. But most of all, I sobbed for myself, for the stupid girl who thought that working hard and doing the right thing would be enough. The speed at which life can change in a single year is astounding. I went from being the good daughter to the family outcast. Even I was surprised by the intensity with which I threw myself into my work. When Sarah, my supervisor, saw how committed I was, she began to give me more responsibility. The company needed someone to come in on weekends to get ready for a big pitch, so I offered when a large customer needed someone to manage their social media problem at 2 in the morning. I was present. My work became my haven, the one place where merit and hard work truly mattered. Before long, I was in charge of my own projects. I was able to start looking for a nicer apartment because the promotion came with a significant rise. Although my small studio no longer seemed so claustrophobic, I had started to have broader dreams. For a down payment on my own home, I opened a savings account. One day, no more renting from relatives or other people. Via social media and mutual connections, I heard tidbits of my relatives. I had never met my nephew, but Emily had given birth to a boy. Numerous images were uploaded on the internet. Pudgy hands reaching for the camera, a little face covered in a blue blanket. The Globe saw the first grins that were recorded. Jason and Emily are still only engaged. While my parents were flooding all of their bills, I was playing house at my old apartment. Then, one day, Emily's email appeared in my inbox without warning. My heart literally skipped a beat when I saw her name. "Hello, sis." It was written as though the previous year had never occurred, as though she hadn't been involved in my expulsion from my house. "Hope you're doing well. I heard you got a promotion. Well done. I'd love for you to come visit and meet your nephew. What a gorgeous little angel he is. You would adore him, I'm sure of it. In addition, I've heard that your financial situation is excellent. Right now." I should have realized there was a catch. It was always there. With Emily. Before I could even process the first email, the next one came in. Not just any list, but a list. My credit card cried when I saw this wish list of baby things. Only observing it. More expensive than my first month's rent are designer clothing. More expensive than my laptop was a stroller. High-end gadgets that most likely cost more than Jason's monthly earnings from his part-time employment. If he still had it at all, I pondered whether this was a prank as I sat there looking at my screen. After everything that had happened after a year of no contact, this was how she chose to reach out. Not with apologies. Not with any acknowledgement of what she'd done, but with a shopping list. "Are you working yet?" I replied, utterly disregarding her list. It was a sharp, purposeful query. Her response came quickly. "Oh, Mom and Dad are taking care of everything. They provide us with spending money and pay all of our bills. Jason and I don't need to work right now. We're focusing on being parents. It's such an important job, you know." Then came the kicker. "Actually, we're thinking of having more kids soon. Mom and Dad are such fools. They're really encouraging. If we have additional children, They will need to continue to assist us. And we want a huge wedding too. Nothing cheap. Everything will be paid for by those old fools. I read Emily's email 3 times, each time feeling more disgusted than the previous. They had changed my little sister into someone I didn't know. Someone who cheerfully accepted our parents' money while calling them old idiots. Someone who intended to have additional kids in order to maintain the gravy train. I didn't respond. What could I say? Congratulations for being a manipulative mooch. How's the professional gold digging working out for you? Instead, I closed my laptop and tried to forget about it. But the words kept ringing in my brain. Everything will be paid for by those old fools. But fate had other plans. A few months later, my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in over a year. Mom's. Something compelled me to pick up Tamara even though I nearly didn't respond. In some way, her voice changed as she spoke. Weary, defeated. We must speak. Would you be able to visit? Curiosity, perhaps. Or perhaps I still had a dream for reconciliation. For whatever reason, I ended up spending the evening driving to my folks' place. The streets that were familiar now felt unfamiliar. Like visiting a location you've only seen in fantasies. They appeared older than I had recalled. Mom's face had more creases, while Dad's hair had grown more gray. Long days and restless nights were symbolized by the dark circles under their eyes. Even though they were sitting on their comfortable couch, their posture conveyed a sense of defeat. Dad said, "We've been taking extra shifts," without introducing himself. He spoke in a tired, gruff voice. "Putting in extra hours to support Jason and your sister." I remained silent and waited. In the quiet, the wall clock ticked away loudly. My heart sank as Mom added, "We know you're doing well at your job." There would be no apologies for this. This was going to be an additional requirement. "We believe it's time for you to assist your sister as well." I was unable to resist. I genuinely laughed out of sheer incredulity. The sound bounced off the walls of the too quiet house. "What do you want me to do?" "Your sister can't work right now," Mom urged, bending forward. "She has the baby to take care of." "It's a full-time job." "What about Jason? He needs to help with the infant too." I gave them a look. These individuals reared me, instilled in me the values of hard work and responsibility, encouraged me to work part-time while attending college, and helped me get high grades. They were now sitting here defending 2 competent adults who refused to provide for themselves. Slowly, I enunciated each syllable carefully. Let me get this straight. You're working additional shifts to support my sister and her fiancé, who are both fully capable of working but chose not to. You now want me to facilitate their indolence. Dad's face flushed. You're acting greedily and selfishly. If you don't help support your sister, consider yourself disowned. You can't disavow someone who's already gone. For what I believed would be the final time, I said this gently and left their home. The sound of the door closing behind me seemed like the period at the conclusion of a very long sentence. When I got home that night, my apartment felt like a sanctuary. I sat down at my computer, got myself a cup of tea, and kicked off my shoes. My hands were steady as I opened my email and found Emily's message from months ago, the one where she bragged about manipulating our parents, branded them old idiots, and explained her plan to avoid work by having more children. I stared at it for a long moment, my cursor hovering over the forward button. A part of me thought I was revealing a secret. But then I remembered Emily had betrayed our parents' trust long before this, without adding any message or explanation. I forwarded the email to Mom. The unvarnished truth can sometimes have greater impact than any commentary. My phone rang a week later, but Mom didn't answer. It was about Sarah, Mom's sister, who had always been the family's unofficial news channel. "You won't believe what happened," she remarked, her voice heavy with family gossip. She was likely still wearing her nursing scrubs from her hospital job, and I could see her sitting in the kitchen with her phone glued to her ear. "Your parents kicked Emily out of the apartment?" I almost spilled my coffee. "What?" There was apparently a big altercation. "Your mom discovered out Emily's been insulting them behind their backs, trying to take advantage of them. They informed her and Jason that they would not be receiving any more money and asked them to leave." I listened as Aunt Sarah recalled the violent encounter, how Emily had yelled and wept, bringing out all her usual dramatic techniques, how Jason had stood there uselessly, looking like a deer in headlights, how Dad had finally put his foot down and told them they had 3 days to go. According to Apsara, Mom had been unnaturally calm, merely stating we'd been played like fools long enough. I wasn't shocked when Emily's number appeared on my phone after I hung up. I could guess the conversation before it even started. Tamara. She was weeping, but it was the same phony crying she had been doing since we were little. Is it possible for us to remain with you till we resolve the matter? Please. There is nowhere else for us to go. No, I answered firmly. I was taken aback by how simple it was to pronounce just one word. You resemble your parents exactly. She let out a scream. You're also self-centered. We are related. Family does not take advantage of family, I said quietly and hung up before she could argue. Through family rumors, I later learned that Emily, Jason, and the infant had moved in with his parents. According to Apsara, his mother was a strong, no-nonsense woman who valued responsibility and harsh love. She was the type of mom who didn't put up with manipulation or freeloading. Emily was miserable. She was required to adhere to a rigid schedule, assist with household chores, and truly raise her child rather than entrusting him to others by her mother-in-law. She had to wash laundry, make meals, and contribute to the household. Emily spent her days crying about how unfair it all was, how nobody understood how hard her life was. Life tends to come full circle. I was celebrating my birthday with friends at my apartment a few weeks ago. I used my savings and good credit to purchase a lovely 2-bedroom home instead of the small studio. I had invited a few people around for drinks and supper. Nothing fancy, just good food and better company. During dessert, a courier brought me a gift when the doorbell rang. My heart skipped a beat when I saw the return address. My parents gave it to me. There was a silver picture frame within, elegant but not flashy. I recognized it immediately. It was the type of item I had once casually admired while out shopping with my mother years prior. I'd been looking for something to exhibit my college graduation and had commented on how gorgeous it was. But the price had been completely out of my budget at the time. With it came a card where sorry we miss you. When you're ready, we'd like to talk. The handwriting was Mom's, but Dad had signed it too. No demands, no guilt trips, just 9 words. I laid the frame on my coffee table and gazed at it for a long time. I honestly didn't know how to respond when my friends inquired how I was doing. How do you explain that a silver frame could feel like both an olive branch and a weapon? 2 weeks have passed since then. I still have the card posted to my refrigerator and the frame on my coffee table. They serve as daily reminders of both what I've lost and what may yet be redeemed. I have yet to give them a call. I can still feel the pain, a dull aching that becomes worse as I remember everything that happened. Family members give me tidbits about Emily. She continues to whine about having to obey rules and complete tasks while living with Jason's parents. Her mother-in-law makes her help with cooking and cleaning and demands that Jason retain his full-time work at a nearby warehouse. They have to contribute to home expenditures and save money if they ever wish to move out on their own. Part of me hopes this experience will help Emily grow up. We'll teach her the principles our parents failed to establish. Perhaps one day she will realize that being family does not entail being a doormat, and that love does not entail condoning terrible conduct. Perhaps she will realize that respect must be earned rather than demanded, and perks come after that duty. As for me, I'm doing fine. I have a successful career. I recently received another promotion and am now in charge of my own team. My close pals appreciate independence and are aware of boundaries. I'm learning to set appropriate limits on all my relationships, personal and professional. Although I'm beginning to realize that my family was never exactly what I had hoped for, I still miss it occasionally. The silver frame rests on my coffee table, both a reminder of what I've lost and a prospect of what can be rebuilt someday. When I'm prepared, when the pain has subsided sufficiently for forgiveness to establish itself, when I'm able to look at my parents and not see the individuals who favored my freedom above allowing my sister's worst conduct. But for now, I'm concentrating on my own life, my own progress, my own path. My flat is progressively becoming a home filled with items I've selected and acquired. I'm planned a vacation for next month, my first genuine one since college. I'm considering acquiring a dog. Little steps in the direction of creating the life I choose, rather than the one that others have attempted to impose upon me. Story 3. My brother told me that I was only the driver when I took my family to the hotel. And everyone laughed as they revealed they had only booked a room for 4 people: parents, brother, and his wife. I calmly replied, "No problem." After making one phone call, I departed. They were in a 35-story stall in the hotel lobby of a contemporary glass office building in Manhattan, New York. Ashley Holmes was standing in front of a big window on the upper floor. It was December 23rd at 3 p.m. She patiently watched as the falling snow converted the typically bustling financial district into a serene, silvery realm. Her desk was buried underneath investment analysis reports for the fourth quarter of the year, and her walls adorned with numerous awards as a financial analyst. At 35, Ashley was recognized as one of the most exceptional senior analysts at the investment bank. Will it really go well tomorrow? She muttered to herself with a sigh, her usually confident expression wavering. It had been 15 years since her father's demise. During that time, Ashley had immersed herself in her work to sustain herself. Her $150,000 salary and well-managed savings were evidence of her hard work. On her phone, a fresh notice showed up. It was the latest Instagram post from her brother Brian, showing off a new Rolex with the caption, "Life is great, luxurious living, happy family." Another brand new timepiece? Ashley frowned. As though it would last forever, her brother had been wasting their father's inheritance. Vanessa, his wife, was similar in that she shared images of high-end purses and accessories virtually every day. Her mother Hillary and stepfather Douglas also lived a lavish life in an upscale residence in Florida. Ashley had received a call from her mother the night before, as usual, regarding money. "Ashley, listen." Her mother's voice had a saccharine tone. "Brian wants to buy a new automobile. He needs a down payment." "All fine, I'll transfer it again," Ashley answered, evidently having acceded to such inquiries many times before. She supported her parents' extravagant lifestyle and assisted her brother financially. From her desk drawer, she brought out a snapshot the last Christmas with her father. The picture was taken in the hospital, and though he was frail, he had a warm smile. "Dad, I'm trying hard," she muttered to the photo before diverting her focus to a reservation. Confirmation next to it. The high-end resort in the Aspen Mountains, Skied Up Lodge. For the Christmas season, she had reserved 34 suites at $800 per night, for a total of roughly $10. It was a significant decision, even on her income. This trip wasn't just a family vacation for Ashley. It was the last chance to mend her relationship with her family by bearing all costs and creating time to spend with the entire family. She hoped something might change. The office phone rang. It was a confirmation call from Skytop Lodge. They wanted to make final arrangements for her stay starting tomorrow. Ashley straightened up, switching to her usual professional mode. "Indeed, this is Ashley." Regarding tomorrow's matter, while on the phone, Ashley looked out the window again. Anxiety and excitement were mixed together in the middle of Ashley's room on a winter afternoon. A Louis Vuitton suitcase was only half packed on the bed. She folded a dark green cashmere sweater that she would wear the following day, while not a $30,000 sweater. Its high-quality material and simple design matched Ashley's interests and life philosophy. "Is this the right outfit?" she mumbled, clutching the dark green sweatshirt on her breast in front of the mirror. Vanessa always wore the latest designer brands, and her mother had grown to prefer flashy clothes to match Douglas's luxurious tastes. The phone rang. William was the one. "Is everything progressing?" His voice carried its usual kindness tinged with concern. "Yes, basically," Ashley said, sounding a bit fatigued. "I've given the staff at Skytop Lodge special instructions. Contact me immediately if anything happens." William was a renowned hotel chain owner in the US, and Skytop Lodge was one of his luxury resorts. They had met at an investors' conference 2 years ago and had been building a steady relationship since. "Thank you, but it'll be okay," Ashley said as she headed towards the window. "I believe this time will be different. Something will change because of this trip." After hanging up the phone, Ashley sat down on the sofa in her living room. On the coffee table was a photograph of her final moments with her father. It was 15 years ago, just before her father passed away in a white hospital room. Her emaciated father had gently held Ashley's hand and said, You're strong. You're the only one I can trust to take care of the family." With such words in her heart, Ashley had studied diligently, graduated from college with outstanding honors, and made her way up in the world of finance. She worked as hard as her male colleagues and earned the position of senior analyst at an investment bank in her early 30s. After their father passed away, her brother Brian left college and continued to live off the inheritance with his stepfather's approval. After getting married, he and his wife Vanessa maintained a luxurious lifestyle. Ashley's smartphone vibrated with a message from Brian. "You're picking me up tomorrow morning, right? Don't oversleep." His typically arrogant tone came through, even in text. Ashley briefly replied, "Of course." She had mixed feelings about using her own car for transportation. Typically, Brian used expensive cab services and seldom ever drove his own car. It was past 10 o'clock when I looked at the clock. She had to pick up her family early the next morning. Ashley sighed as she began to organize the rest of her luggage, whether it was anticipation for tomorrow. Her heartbeat quickened slightly. Looking at her father's photo one last time, his smile seemed encouraging. "Tomorrow will surely go well," she murmured to herself as she headed to the bedroom. It felt it would take a while to go into a quiet slumber, with a mix of eagerness and concern about the next day. On Christmas Eve morning, Manhattan was enveloped in a silvery world of snow. The clock showed 6 a.m. Ashley woke up before her alarm clock sounded. She took a deep breath and got out of bed, telling herself that today was the day. She woke up 30 minutes earlier than planned, which was actually better. She wanted to be properly prepared before picking up her family in front of a huge mirror in the bathroom. Ashley carefully applied her makeup around her neck. She wore a single diamond necklace that was a keepsake from her father. Ashley's modest yet sophisticated clothing was a subtle representation of her ideal self, the self-assurance she had built up over the course of her 35 years of existence, and her fear about the future. The underground parking garage of her luxury apartment building was quieter than usual. Most residents were probably still asleep on Christmas Eve morning. Ashley turned on her black Mercedes-Benz 550, which gleamed in the garage lights. The navigation system displayed the route. The first destination was the upscale apartment on the Upper East Side, where her mother and stepfather lived. From there, she would head to Brian and Vanessa's new home in Brooklyn. The roads were clear, but careful driving was necessary due to the snow. When she arrived at the Upper East Side, her mother, Hillary, was already waiting at the entrance of the apartment, dressed in a showy scarlet coat and clutching a huge Gucci purse. Her stepfather, Douglas, got into the back seat without a word. "Good morning, Ashley." Her mother's voice had a forced tone, as if welcoming a high-quality taxi driver. They then proceeded to the Brooklyn home of Brian and Vanessa. The couple had recently moved to an expensive area, despite rumors that their inheritance was running low. Continuing to keep up appearances. "Ashley, you're late." Brian's voice carried his usual arrogance. Vanessa was dressed in a new Gucci coat, holding a matching bag. Both appeared as if they had walked out of a fashion magazine with everyone on board. Ashley cautiously grabbed the wheel. Sitting in the passenger seat, Brian was continuously tinkering with his phone, most likely posting something boastful. The atmosphere inside the car was heavy. Apart from occasional whispers between Hillary and Vanessa, there was hardly any conversation. After about 2 hours of driving, the snow-covered peaks of the Pocono Mountains came into view, stunningly magnificent, and alleviated some of Ashley's strain. "You can see it now," Brian suddenly shouted. The luxurious structure of Skytop Lodge appeared amidst the snowy landscape. The grand building, styled in Italian Renaissance, displayed a stunning harmony with the surrounding nature. A giant Christmas tree decorated the front entrance, and illuminations sparkled everywhere. Luxury cars arrived one after another, and wealthy families alighted. When Ashley parked the car in front of the entrance, a uniformed bellboy approached. From that moment, everything began to change. "You've worked hard to get us here." Brian's voice, icy cold, resonated inside the car. Ashley twisted around to look at the back seat. There she saw her brother with a malicious smirk she had never seen before. Her mother, Hillary, and stepfather Douglas averted their gazes as Vanessa gave a faint grin. Ashley instinctively felt that something bad was about to happen. The driver's job finishes here. This hotel is exclusively for us, the real family, Brian said. Ashley was momentarily stunned. It felt as though the temperature inside the car had plummeted. What are you saying? Ashley's voice trembled slightly. I made the reservations. Oh, the reservations? Brian scoffed. They've already been changed just to our names. Her mother, Hillary, looked troubled, but said nothing. Her stepfather, Douglas, continued to look out the window. Vanessa did not bother to hide her malicious grin. Everyone except Ashley got out of the car. Brian told the bellhop to grab the bags. Ashley slowly took out her smartphone. William's number was pressed while she made a conscious effort to keep her hands from shaking. After a few rings, his calm voice came through. Hello, Ashley. William, cancel the reservations. Ashley's voice retained an unexpected calm. All of them, please. After a moment of silence on the other end, William seemed to understand the situation. I get it. I'll arrange it right away. At that time, a staff worker in uniform approached from the front desk against the backdrop of pristine snow. The black uniform stood out sharply from inside the car. Ashley observed everything from the window. I'm sorry, we cannot find your reservation. The staff member informed them. The smile vanished from Brian's face. Hillary began fumbling through her purse in a panic. Douglas turned to face the front for the first time. There must be an error. Hillary's anxious muttering was audible. Ashley slowly rolled down the car window. It's no mistake. Ashley's voice was calm. All reservations have been canceled. Goodbye, Ashley. Hold on. Brian's voice carried a note of desperation. It's just a joke. You know that, right? But Ashley had already started the engine and grasped the steering wheel in the rearview mirror. She observed her family standing bewildered. Vanessa's expensive boots sank into the snow. Ashley. Hillary's voice faded with the wind. Slowly, the car pulled out of the hotel parking lot and started to backtrack. The snow continued to fall. A solitary tear ran down Ashley's face. It was more a tear of liberation than of sorrow. Her smartphone began to ring. It was Brian calling. She ignored it. Then followed a call from Hillary. Ignored as well. Messages started arriving one after another. Why would you do this? It's Christmas Eve. You've embarrassed us. Will you refund the accommodation costs? Ashley let out a small laugh at the last message. In the end, their focus was always in money, not in love or familial relationships. Pretends and computations only. Ashley made the decision to go to William's penthouse rather than her own apartment as she drove down the mountain toward the city. She felt a refreshing feeling of clarity, reflected from her expression in the rearview mirror. The street lights gently lighted the falling snow, lending a serene tint to the joyous evening. The calm inside the car, free of any occupants in the rear, was unexpectedly soothing. Ashley's vehicle slid into William's penthouse's underground parking garage 2 hours later. As she entered the elevator, a warm feeling began to spread throughout her chest. It was clear to her that she was headed to the right place when she opened the door to the penthouse. The warmth of the room and William's presence welcomed her. The fireplace was already blazing, softly lighting up the living room. Ashley, are you okay? William inquired. His voice filled with great caring. Indeed. Ashley returned the smile. Actually, I feel relieved. Ashley told him everything, and William listened patiently as he made 2 glasses of wine. Brian's sly grin, her mom, Hillary's averted eyes, and what she had done herself. You made the proper decision, Ashley. From the couch facing the hearth, William gave her reassurance. But I wrecked their Christmas because of me, Ashley muttered, gazing at the wine glass in her hand. That is untrue. William's voice was soft, yet forceful. Their own Christmas was wrecked. You just safeguarded your own value. Ashley's eyes filled with tears, but they were not tears of sorrow. Rather, these were tears of relief from the years-long load she had been carrying. Her smartphone vibrated again. It was a message from Douglas, her stepfather, this time. The whole family has been shamed by your selfishness. Don't ever show your face again. Ashley turned off her smartphone completely. She had never experienced the warmth of her family before, but William put his hand on her shoulder. From tomorrow, a new life begins, Ashley stated, peering into the flames of the fireplace. I will no longer allow anyone to meddle in my affairs. William gave a quiet nod. For Ashley, this was the most significant Christmas Eve ever. Her family was still with her. She had found herself again. The souvenir jewelry from her father softly gleamed in the light of the flame. Manhattan was engulfed in a gleaming white wonderland on Christmas morning. Snow continued to fall softly between the high buildings, quietly masking the events of the previous day, creating a postcard-like vista from William's penthouse windows. "Good morning, honey." William was already brewing coffee when he met her. The scent of espresso permeated the room. "This morning, I received a call from Skytop Lodge." William began in silence. "It was quite a scene with your family." Standing near the window with a mug held in her hands, Ashley answered coolly, "That's what I anticipated." Brian must have made a scene. As soon as she turned on her smartphone, notifications flooded the screen. Over 40 missed calls. Almost 100 messages, with a few from Douglas. The most came from her mother, Hillary, and brother, Brian. "Do you think this is okay, Ashley? I'll never forget how you made us seem foolish in a 5-star hotel lobby. You have no right to abuse us like this. How about this evening?" Her mother sent the final message. "We need to talk about money. Call me ASAP." Ashley let out a long sigh and put the phone away. William gave her a comforting embrace from behind. "I've already decided. I'm prepared to face whatever comes next," Ashley said, liberated and empowered. Ashley's determination was evident as she turned to face William. "I'm severing all connections with them," she said resolutely. William gave a quiet nod. His face conveyed his complete support for her choice. "Are you certain about this?" Gently, he inquired. "After all, they are your family." "No, they aren't," Ashley answered with conviction. "A true family supports and understands one another. They were only strangers with a financial obsession." The two proceeded to the breakfast table where William had prepared croissants and scrambled eggs, a modest but meaningful meal. Ashley had been looking for happiness, and this was it. Ashley Williams looked genuinely at Ashley and added, "I have a proposal for you. How about we share a home?" Ashley was stunned for a second, the snow slowly falling outside the window. "Let's start a new life here together," William proposed, his words bringing tears to Ashley's eyes, tears of gladness at being released from the false shackles of family and discovering a new real one. "Yes," Ashley grinned. "William, that sounds fantastic." At that moment, her phone started ringing once again. Mom appeared on the screen, but Ashley didn't hesitate any longer. She took up the phone and totally blocked her mother's number, followed by Brian and Douglas. "I've taken a new step," Ashley stated with a clear and cheerful face. William answered with a loving smile. A severe cold wave struck Manhattan in mid-January, shortly after the New Year, from the window of Ashley's office. In the cold north wind, the cityscape appeared to tremble. "Mizuho, there's a visitor for you in the lobby." The voice on the intercom was that of her secretary. "Miss S. Hillary Brown is here." Above the keyboard, Ashley's hands hesitated. Brown, Hillary. Since that Christmas Eve, she had not heard her mother's name before. "I get it. I'll be right there," Ashley answered, her voice quivering a little. In the first-floor foyer of high-rise buildings, Ashley's high heels reverberated on the marble floor as she braced herself for the reunion with her mother. Her mother was seated on the guest sofa, not in her normal flamboyant clothes, but in a modest greatcoat. She was obviously tired, as evidenced by the muted makeup. "Could I enter?" The old haughtiness was gone from her mother's voice. After giving her mother a slight nod, Ashley escorted her to the elevator. When they got to the office, Ashley motioned for her mom to take a seat on the reception area sofa. Outside, light snow began to dance in the air. "I needed to chat, so I came here." Sitting across from Ashley and sharing a cup of coffee, her mother began in a low voice. "We're at our breaking point." Ashley had anticipated it well. After years of lavish living, her father's estate was all but gone. Her stepfather's real estate ventures had failed, and they were now overwhelmed with debt. Brian was struggling to pay for his new car and was behind on rent. "We require assistance." Her mother's voice trembled. "Is money at stake, Mom?" Ashley asked in a relaxed tone. "Yes," her mom said reluctantly. "For Brian's vehicle loan, Mom, and living costs each month. That's sufficient." Ashley cut her off. I'm not the family bank anymore, Mom. I have made the decision to live my own life. Ashley's eyes showed a firm resolve, while her mother's look was cloudy. We are family, though. In any case, what is true family? Ashley inquired softly. During Christmas, you all treated me like a chauffeur. You said nothing when Brian gave me that bitter smirk. Is that family? There was a thick silence in the room. Hillary, her mother, spoke tearfully. Listen, Ashley. I'm in serious danger right now, but I really apologize for what transpired that day. I need your assistance. Ashley slowly stood up and walked to the window, gazing out at the view. In the background was the building her father used to run. Mom, go home, Ashley replied without turning around. Additionally, don't return. My life is mine. Ashley. Mom, goodbye. Her mother stood up silently, though it appeared like she wanted to say more. The room reverberated with the sound of the door closing. Ashley sighed heavily as she returned to her desk and stroked her father's remembrance jewelry. Her chest felt a little lighter, which was odd because it was heavy. The coming of spring has altered the Manhattan view from the window of William's apartment. The park was alive with blooms in full bloom. Ashley stared at the view while holding her morning coffee. What are you thinking about, Ashley? William inquired gently from behind her. Just a bunch of things. Ashley turned to smile in response. My life has changed a lot in the last 3 months. The changes were substantial, in fact. She had been promoted to head of her department at the investment bank and had told William she was engaged. Her abilities were completely appreciated as the team leader for a new project. There had been no contact from her mother, and Brian's flamboyant social media posts had gone. A coworker later informed her that they had downsized from a lavish apartment to a more affordable one. Now enjoying a simpler life. Do you have any regrets? Standing next to her, gazing at the cherry blossoms, William posed the question. Not a single one. I've decided to go this route. Ashley touched her father's memento necklace in response. Blood ties aren't the exclusive definition of true family, Ashley pondered. It's about supporting and understanding one another. At dusk in a fancy restaurant where she had met William, he had important news. William said with joy, We're going to grow with a new hotel chain on the West Coast. Additionally, I would like you to serve as an investment advisor. Ashley instantly gave a nod. Work in private life. Everything was settling into its ideal equilibrium. She sensed something. A fresh start for our lives. Ashley raised her glass. Indeed, our existence. William clinked his glass with hers and grinned. The sound of the bell was like the start of a fresh chapter.